Alrighty, it is week 8, and actually in the RL, it's actually the beginning of week 7. But in this case, I'm recording for week 8. And what was helpful for or informative to what I'm about to say is I got to review those of you who submitted your week 7 attendance. And it's very good. I mean, these exercises, honestly, is the more code challenges you get, the more it actually makes you really see how well you're translating the concepts and the skills that we're covering. So these are important checkpoints. And in this case, I really am just grading on did you try it, but you want to see how well can you do it. And this week, I'm going to give you a few more specifics as far as some things that I saw from the last one. Okay, so before I get into the other topics this week, just an overview, I'm going to continue us working in week 5. I think it's just because it was a little easier. And I think I'm going to have you end up just deleting the code. And if we use this again, I don't know. We're getting to the place actually in this course where our weeks are going to look different starting in week 9. So I'll cover that in week 9, which is next week. Okay. But in any case, do this code challenge in week 9 public. And that way you don't really have to change any URL. And here's my caveat, right? So for this one, first, see how far you can get. Now I'm about to tell you, and you can see down here, but I'll just walk you through what I want. First, see how far you can get on your own, right? And then commit that with my code. And then find resources that can help you find the solution if you need it. The idea is to do as much on your own, spend that time in the process of evaluating how well can you do something we just learned, because the sooner you use something, the sooner you actually integrate that skill, and then on an ongoing basis, the more you use it, the more likely you are to retain it. This is why people who don't code every day, or people that maybe have coded a couple of weeks ago and for sure a couple of months and for sure a couple of years, have to have what we call a ramp up time. They will eventually generally ramp up quicker, but the more you code, the more you understand and the better your skill. Okay, so in this case, you're creating, so now keep the same logic of, however you wrote it to output. And the thing is, you want to be able to, in this case, right, generally you want to have one of your movies meet the recommendation. But if you have two, that's okay too. But in the case of that, also you're outputting a table. So now in this case, I didn't even do a table heading. I just did a regular table. I did use some of that CSS that we implemented to outputs and with some padding and some outline just to highlight it, right? But in this case, the idea of outputting just a table is kind of the idea that oftentimes when we're communicating data, we're often just giving back structured data. Even though this is HTML structured data, it is a way to output that. Okay, so that's the thing you need to do this week. Now, in that process, I want you to attempt to do this, which is eliminate global variables as much as possible. I saw some of you writing like your references to the DOM and other things out on the global space, and you really want to eliminate that as much as possible. You shouldn't really have, in this case, really the only thing that should be out there is really the function setup and then maybe the array. Now I showed you how in mine I just passed my array of objects from the call, right, from the call of the function in. Now you don't have to go that far, but in this case, eliminate. I want to see all your code, really, except for those things I've mentioned, inside of a function, because really it's functions, reusable code that you want to be able to write. And the other thing I noticed, and I was curious where this came from, so maybe in your reply you can tell me, I noticed many of you were using strings for the values. Now we're going to talk about, as we get into local storage later, and that's just a way to save our inputs, that we do something called stringify. But in this case, you're defining what these values are. So use the value, the integer value, not the string. Now, JavaScript does something to help you. It actually does what we call coercing. So when you are actually evaluating the value in there, it actually will convert it. But why have it do that? Why? You don't need to, because you can declare, right, or assign that key an integer value. So do that, right? So make sure you do that and change them this week, right? So like year, rating, and watched should all be just integer values. And I think I saw, I'm trying to remember who it was, actually did a out of 10. That's fine too. But again, you could, in the parse flow, yeah. Anyway, it worked, right? But for the most part, right? So here's the output. So how do you get graded for this? Is you do, right, give us the URL, right? And in this case, right, and you reply, tell us if you were able to do this with or without looking at examples, right? Or chatting with some, Gen AI. Again, the idea is do as much as you can. If you were able to do it without assistance, tell us your approach, right? If you needed help, tell us where you got help and what you did. And it's not to say these are wrong. It's just to say how much of this were you able to achieve, right? So reply to one student, and there you go. And again, here's my solution. Don't watch it until you're ready. Okay, so let's look at week 8 as we move into the right before things are starting to change. So for week 8, we're actually going to look at this render. Now, one thing I noticed, and you'll see this in coming weeks, I end up fixing the way I'm iterating over. And this is actually a pretty good time to talk about it, because you're going to do this for the challenge. How do you reference, right? Because now we have we have for the for each, we have the object reference. So how do we then build out that table? Right? And we saw how I did it in the solution for week 7. You'll see that, right? But there's other ways to do it. There's other loops and object.keys to do it. And I ended up changing or showing you a new implementation of a loop with object.keys, I believe, this time. And then we actually move on to rendering the buttons, and then actually attempting the U part, the update part. And I ended up doing this for this iteration of the course, what I call a hack. And it's something that works. It's not the best practice, but it works for the purposes of where we're at. Okay, so that's what you're going to do this week. Now, in the very first item, it is really important. What you're going to do before we even start coding is I'm going to have you, go through. Right, before we start coding, I want you to make sure you understand the code we've written, because that is so important, right? So I want you to set breakpoints, right? Create a new file called README, which, by the way, I need to actually standardize going forward. README is the only file that is okay to uppercase all, right? Oh, that's the other thing. In the code challenges, make sure you're using camel case, right? So then here's what I will do. I will grade, this part of how well did you go through and do it. Now, I also go through after you do the commit and walk you through the code, so you can update your understanding, because this ability to look and read code to understand it is really super important. Okay. I just need to say we're moving to week 9. Week 9 is where we then change to where we have one code along, one code discussion, and then we're doing a step in the decision app. So the reason I had you do the or and the and the or, right? The writing the condition to where it has more than one thing it evaluates, is because we're moving to writing this in your decision app, because decisions most likely involve more than one condition for you to evaluate. So that's coming here. And then the technical interview, the opening of that technical interview opens after you get through week 9. And by the way, week 9 is also at midpoint of the semester, and there's nobody. I mean, actually, overall, this class is doing really well, but just so that you're informed, at the end of week 9 is also that point that you have to say if you're going to hang out for the rest of the semester. Because if you do, which I hope you all do, then that's the grade that you get. So this is your last opportunity at the end of week 9 to drop the course. Again, I'm not recommending it. I just like you to understand. Maybe you've been around enough semesters, not many, but enough semesters to know how things work. Anyway, I have, like I did last week, I put the solution to the discussion. But remember, to get most of the points, you have to tell us what you tried and then what you learned from watching the solution, because learning happens at different everybody learns at their own individual rate, space and time, and focus that you can give it. So more than anything, I just want you to learn from whatever way you select to get through this. And of course, the most you can get from it is actually be able to code it. But it's okay to get help, but skipping that process kind of robs, not kind of, in my opinion, it robs you of that. All right, so at the end of week 8, I'm actually going to be traveling from the end of week 8 all the way through week 9. Now, this doesn't mean I'm not available. I still will be Zooming. Sound like a dog. Okay. Don't get distracted, squirrel. I still will be available via Zoom. So just know that, and I've seen several of you come into either office hours or Zoom. I'm still going to be available there. I just won't be available on campus end of week 9, 8 through week 9. But I will be back after that. Okay? All right. Have fun with the challenge. Please reach out for help. It's a good idea to talk about this code that we're doing with these what I call little. They're getting more involved, but again, code challenges are good. All right. Have a good week. I'll talk to you later.